Hi, everyone. Today we'll talk about linking APIs in Smojo, and I'll go through how you can link the Azure text-to-speech or TTS API within Smojo. All right, but it would really help if you guys knew the basic part of Smojo. There's a tutorial there which takes about 2 to 3 hours. You can try the quizzes. This is the part, right? So you just go to your IDE, click on the top right side where it says Smojo, and you can actually see this tutorial coming up. This will help you understand our discussion a lot better since we'll use this basics module quite extensively when I show you how to create the code. Okay, so what is an API? Well, it stands for Application Programming Interface. And what that means is that it's actually a way for two computers to communicate. There's a server computer that has some kind of information that needs to be shared. And frequently, this computer is accessible through HTTP, right? I'll come to that later on. So you have a server computer, right? The icon is the books there. And you have a separate client computer, perhaps this is your laptop or something else, which requests information from the server. And they have to talk the same language, and the language they use is HTTP. Okay, so the information that can go across from client to server could be something like, how do you take a piece of text and then convert it to voice, or let's say text to text, like I got a query in GPT, a prompt, and then the server will then respond with the answer from the prompt. So frequently APIs describe how exactly the data is going to be exchanged. It could be in text format, like I said before, or binary format. And almost all of the APIs utilize the Hypertext Transfer Protocol or HTTP protocol because it is very widely supported and very widely used. So a server then is just a website, essentially, which is accessible through a URL. And a client could be a web browser, or in our case, it could be a Smojo chatbot. So to get started, we need to really understand this HTTP protocol in a lot of detail, actually. Okay, so what is it? It stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It was originally designed to distribute web pages and web media, like images, web pages, and so on, videos and so on, right? So the idea is that you've got a client. In this case, the client is a web browser, and it initiates a request to the server, right? And the server sends back a response. So the client here sends a HTTP formatted request, and it gets back a response from the server. So both the request and the response need to conform to a certain protocol, which is the HTTP format, basically. Okay. So the request needs a single route, which tells the server, which part of the server is being accessed. There can be one or more parameters in the request itself. And last of all, there are also headers. Okay, so the headers is usually where the secret keys and other stuff are stored. But there are other things that are stored there as well. So in maybe terms that you're more familiar with, the route could be like a URL to a search engine. That's the route. Okay. This is also known as an endpoint. Okay, some people use an endpoint terminology. Parameters, for example, in a search engine could be the keywords you want to search for. And headers could be the cookies that might be stored on your browser, or perhaps something like a session ID to prevent abuse. And a lot of other stuff that goes on in the header itself. Okay, so like when you use a web browser and click on, let's say, Google in this case, then you can see the first part there in the location bar would be the route or the endpoint. And past the question mark are the parameters. And the parameters are always key value pairs. So in this case, the Q is a key, and elephants would be the value that I'm searching for. The Q perhaps stands for query, and elephants is the search term that I typed in. Okay, and there could be more parameters. So the headers cannot be seen directly in your web browser. You have to use some other tool to actually display the headers that are being sent to the server as part of the request. Now, there are two kinds of requests that your browser or your system can make in HTTP. Okay, the first is called GET. Second one is called POST. For GET, you only send parameters directly in the URL, but in POST, there is additionally a data section to send more extensive pieces of data. So we will use both. So which you use, of course, depends on the particular API that you are trying to connect with. So you have to read the documentation very carefully. So there are some things that you want to look out for. The first part is that it's very rare for APIs just to use the GET request. Usually they want more information. They want some extensive data, and that would go in the POST bit. So the data you might send would be like JSON formatted data, which is for Azure GPT. Or in our case, we are going to send XML format data for speech to text, text to speech. Also, many of the paid services will require authentication. Sometimes even non-paid services require authentication, and that means you need to have either a developer key or some kind of secret key. Okay, so this secret key very rarely goes in the parameters part. It usually goes in the header section of the HTTP request. Okay, so you need to have a checklist when you read these API documents because they can be very extensive and it's easy to get lost in the documentation itself. So the first thing you got to ask is, of course, are you using a GET or a POST? What are the routes or endpoints, okay, of the API itself? If you get the endpoint wrong, it will usually give you an error of some kind, right? Then you need to ask, are there any parameters that you need to specify, right? And you need to take, of course, note of the units if they are units. Now, if a post is required, what data is needed to be sent in the data section itself? Okay, so this is a tricky bit where you need to read the documentation. Does it need anything in the header? Well, for the Azure APIs, yes, you do need, in fact, one or more pieces of information in the header section. And also, lastly, excuse me, what kind of data is sent back by the server? And this is the HTTP response. Okay, you need to understand the format of the data that's being sent back. So a lot of the documentation that we have that you probably see online, whether it's for Microsoft Azure or for other APIs, they are usually very well documented. And they usually give you example codes in maybe one or more programming languages, right? So you have a lot of documentation. The important part is not to get lost and to be able to actually know what to look for. So this is your checklist here, right? The hardest part really, at least when it comes to using the API, is to correctly send the post data and to correctly display the data once you have received it, right? Okay, so what we're going to do next is to look at the Azure Voice API. Okay, I'll walk you through a sample analysis, and this is the documentation website. I suggest that you take a screenshot, or you can just go there directly and go through that documentation yourself. All right, pause this video, go through the documentation yourself, and see whether you can make sense of it, given the checklist that I've given you already. Right, so this documentation is extremely extensive because it's quite hard to use. Not hard, but maybe you need the documentation to know how to use this API. There are actually two parts to it. So there are many ways. If you are a Python programmer, for example, you want to zoom into the Python part. But I will always suggest that you use the REST call or the REST API. Okay, so this is a simple way that you can just use the API through shell scripts. So shell scripts are programs, tiny programs that you can run either on Windows to a PowerShell, or maybe on Linux with the Bash shell. And it's very succinct, and it's very clear what you need to put into the headers, what the body of the data is going to be like. And best of all, you don't need a programming language; you just test it almost immediately. So read the rest for if that's available for the API that you're looking at. It certainly is available for the Azure APIs. Okay, so the REST API is out on this link, right? So let me just look. We'll look first at just being able to list the available voices. So for the Microsoft Azure text-to-speech API, there are many different voices that you can select from. So there is an API to tell you what voices are available, okay? Because they are in different languages, different genders, different locales, and so on. So let me just stop this share. And maybe go on and share my screen here. Okay, so the API itself, just close this down. Yeah. Okay, so this is the front page for the text-to-speech API. Okay, and you can see it's very extensive. There are many different sections here on the left, and of course here as well. And what we want to do is just to zoom in on the part where it talks about, again, text-to-speech, and maybe we look at the quick start, okay? So I like it that the Azure API has got a lot of these quick starts, and where you can, very quickly just go to the parts that you might be interested in, right? There are many different languages or tools you can select from. I suggest you choose the REST API. Now this documentation is very comprehensive and very well done. Not all APIs are documented like this so nicely, okay? But you can use the REST API. And we want to just scroll down until we find out, okay, how do we actually, so here you can see how to use the API itself. But what I want to do is to look at listing the voices. So we've got to do a bit of, let's click on this one here. Oh, there you go. So get a list of voices, okay? So let's look at that. So now, this is where you need to pause very slowly and look at it carefully. So the first thing that we know is that the endpoint is listed here, right? Because this is the endpoint. You can see the word endpoint there. It's TTS speech Microsoft.com/cognitive services/voices/list, right? And this is always HTTPS, right? Now you do need also in front of that something called a region. That's according to the doc. So prefix the voices with your region. Our region is East US, not West US. Okay, so for these large cloud services like Azure, AWS, Google, and so on, they split their data centers according to regions. And when you subscribe, you actually attach yourself to one of those regions only. And you only have permissions to run programs or run the API on the region that you chose. So the one that we subscribed for initially, or were given actually, was the East US region. So for us, it won't be West US, it'll be East US, okay? So now this is where you need to be very careful. What are the request headers? So, well, first of all, there is the secret key. It's got this long name out here, OCP, APIM, subscription key. It's actually the secret key, okay? You don't need to use the authorizations, either one or the other, all right? So we're using the secret key. Now, you use the authorization one if you're using JavaScript or some language where the user can see the key. So if the user can see the key, then you don't want to share your secret key because they can then use it for their own purposes. Instead, what you would do then is to actually use your secret key, get a temporary token, which is called the authorization token, then use that in your JavaScript and so on. Okay, but we won't be doing that because that takes a lot of time for me to explain. I'll just show you the simple way of doing it, which is through Smojo alone, and that is just using your secret key. So your secret key is never actually exposed to anyone. Okay, so that's the first thing that we need to take note of. And we need to take note of the header itself. So I just copy and paste this, right? So I'll go out here and I will just paste this here, okay? So we need to know what the secret key is. And I've already I've already actually stored my secret key in a separate file. And I'll say include secret, okay? And this is how you store the git. You can, now I created a function called a word called secret key, which has the secret key that I use inside of there. And I put in a separate file, okay, because I don't want to share it online, obviously. So that's the first thing I need, the request header. So there's only one here. It's either this or this, not both. And you can see it's a GET request. So that's quite easy, right? I just need a GET request. And here, you can see what the sample is, sample code for the HTTP request. So it's only one thing that you need, which is the secret key, right? And then, of course, you need the location of the endpoint. So the other part is the endpoint. I'll just copy the endpoint itself. I'll just copy the entire endpoint here. Okay. So this is my endpoint here. Okay, but I know that I need to replace this West US with something else. So I'll use a quote instead of using a string. Okay. And because I'm using a quote, I need to actually, wrap all of this stuff up in a function, right? So maybe I call it list voices. And the idea is that it's going to produce some kind of string which I can display, right? It's not done yet, obviously. This won't work. And here for West US, I want to change that to region. Okay. And I'm going to specify that the region is, in our case, is East US. All right. And let's say region. Okay. So if you're not familiar with the quotes, what's going to happen here is that I've stored this into a variable, right? So region means East US, and here I've bound it to a context variable. It's under your there's a video on using quotes, or I think it's video number 7. You can look under C101. But essentially, this text here, East US, is going to be plugged in here. Okay, I could have done just this if I wanted to. Okay, but I'm going to make this flexible so that you can change the region if you need to, right? Right, and because maybe I'd use a variable instead of one of those pointy things. Okay, so it's just a variable out here. So at this stage, all I have is just a piece of text here, my secret key, and a new piece of text, which is the endpoint itself. Okay, it doesn't do anything. Okay, so let's move on. And we know that we need to use HTTP GET, and that should be it. Okay, so how do we use HTTP GET? Well, let me just stop the share here a bit before we move on, just to make sure they're all on the same page. Okay, I've done this already. Okay, so again, the API supports a list voices, okay, and a text-to-speech as well. We are using the East US endpoint. We can use either both get or post. I'm going to use get. We know that it needs the secret key, and there are no parameters, no extra parameters that's needed, and no data section is needed. And the response is actually a JSON file, right? It's a text file with a funny little format for data exchange. And it contains all the information on the supported voices. Okay. So to use Smojo to actually grab that data, we need to use something called a HTTP GET. Now this is stored in a module called utils. All right, so you need to put an include utils, and then you can actually use it anywhere you want with by prefixing it with the star utils. Okay, so this HTTP GET2 is special. It takes two parameters, the URL or the endpoint that you're trying to look at, and additionally a hash. So if you don't know what a hash is, again, you have to go to the basic tutorial to learn what a hash is. It's basically a key value data store, okay, a store in memory. And HTTP GET2 responds back either with an output hash, which I've colored in blue, or null, which is like, something went wrong. Okay, so the URL again is just that, which we already have. The input hash needs to have all the headers that we want to put in. And this for us is just one thing. So that's the Azure key. And the data is sent back through a text file, which we will just print. Okay, so the hash that's sent back, if it's not null, the data is stored under the key response. I'll just show you how to do this very quickly. This will work on the editor. So in other words, you can make any API call in the editor. So the editor is very free in where you can make the calls. You can test out and so on quite easily. But if you want to run it on app.smojo.org, then there will be restrictions. Okay, so we've locked down app.smojo.org for security reasons, because we don't want people to use their chatbots to go and spam websites and make a nuisance of themselves, right? So we only allow certain websites, your chatbot, to connect to certain APIs. Okay, so of course we've included the East US Microsoft Azure API. You can use those things. All right, but if you're using other API endpoints, then you may have problems. It might work on the editor, but it may not work on the chatbot. All right, so you really want to maybe check with us and see whether it's whitelisted or not. Right, so let me just give you a quick demo of writing the code. I've actually quite begun already. To get a sense of where we're going. All right, so we have here the secret key. Maybe I say, okay, look, we know that we want to put this into a header, maybe a get header function. And it produces a header, which is a hash. So I'm going to store it a header like that, a hash. I'm creating a new hash, which is the hash symbol out here. And I'm binding it to the name H. And here, I'm going to store my secret key inside. Now, again, if you're confused by all these little symbols, it's under the Smojo, what's it called again, tutorial, under hashes, okay? It's well documented out here what this thing does and what it's all about. But I would recommend, said before, that you go through this one, welcome to reductions. That would really help you understand a lot of what's going on, okay? Takes you a couple of hours. Okay, so once this is done, what this means is that you've got a key, which is the OCP AIM subscription, and you've got the actual secret key itself, okay? And it's stored in this hash. I'm going to return the hash. That's all I need. Those are all the headers that I need for this list voices API. Okay, all it's doing is just to list the voices that are available on Microsoft for my region. So the syntax to call this thing is that I need to also include utils. If I don't do this, if I don't include utils, I just say something like, here I use the get header here, and I call HTTP get 2. Okay. Here this looks like a hash. Okay. If I try to just play this, you can just test out your code. So always write a bit of code. Don't write too much, write a bit. Then click on the run and see if we have any errors. Well, obviously here I've got tons of errors here. It can't find secret.m. Okay, so because I've not saved this file yet. Let me just save this file. So I've done this for once already. Let me just do this again. List voices. Okay, call it 2. Okay. And run this. Okay, so it says unknown word CTX, right? So this CTX thing, I need to do and include code. If I try it again, it says unknown word get 2. Well, that's because I don't have the utils done. Okay, so now I've got two includes here, utils and code. These are actually from Smojo itself. Okay, they're not from a file on your computer. But it still says unknown because the utils is bound in the module, which means that I need to prefix this by utils star. Okay, so the utils star is the module and and this is the function name. So it's module followed by function name. If I run this, it will say can't find utils. Okay. Did I include everything? Include. Sorry, it's not utils star, it's star utils. Okay. All right, so now it's okay. All right, so it's like it's star utils, yeah. Okay, so now will this work? Let's try it. So I say list voices. Then I put a dot, a period just to print the stuff out. I'm going to run this. And yes, actually it does print something out here. And this is actually the JSON file that I talked about. Okay. So there are other things here. This is actually a hash of hashes. So here there is the response. Here is the HTTP header here, and here's the response. Okay, so I'm going to clean this up a bit. If I get the wrong secret key, for example, you would see something else happening. So let's try the wrong secret key. Let's say I tried instead something like ABC123 or something like that. Okay. Let's say I comment this out. Outside ABC here. ABC123. I try running it now. Now you see I get a different response, and the response here in this case is now. All right, so you can see that the response is now, which means that the server is refusing the API request because I don't have a valid a secret key in the header itself. Okay, so just to recap, I'm using HTTP get 2. It's in the utils, star utils module, and it has 2 inputs. The first one is the endpoint, which is I put out here. It's the endpoint. The second input are the headers that I require, which is I've tucked it into a nice function here called get header. Get headers if you want. I'll get headers one. And it passes it on to HTTP get 2. Okay, and that will give you back a hash. But the hash, the actual response is under the key response. And if that's null, it means something went wrong. You can actually examine what went wrong by checking the error out here. And what you do is you say, okay, I'm going to bind it to some X. And I say, okay, now X hash add dot. Okay. Again, like I said before, this is the key, this is the value. You need to understand how a hash works. If you're not familiar, go back to Smojo tutorial and go under hashes, and you can find out, everything you need about hashes. Okay. All right. So now if I run this now, you can see the detailed. Okay, it's a tuple. So to print a tuple out, I can use a dot. I just type in tuple, and then you can say the error is it's unauthorized. Okay. So always check the internal parts of this thing to see what the error is before you proceed in your APIs. It's a good way for you to understand what went wrong. Because there are many different things. It could be like, it could be a permission denied, like unauthorized. That means you got the wrong permissions. Or it could be that you've sent it the wrong format data. Then it will tell you it's the wrong format. Okay, then you can debug it that way. So this is a very nice API to use. Okay, the Azure one, because it gives you a lot of feedback. Okay, so now that's all we are doing here, right? So if this is okay, all right, I want to then extract out just the response part. So I'm going to rewrite list voices. All right, I'm going to say again, list voices, and put it to X. And I could say if it's null, I'm just going to say something or return I'm going to return a string, not a hash anymore. Okay, bad request. I'm going to exit. Right. And similarly, if the response is null, I'm going to say again, perhaps I want to just extract the error message that it came through and display it to the user, right? So the error message is stored under null x hash at, and I know it's a tuple. I need to extract the zeroth or the first zeroth entry. Okay, I'm going to exit this. And finally, so I need to drop this. What am I just do? Something like this. R for response. If R is null, I'll just extract the value and exit. Otherwise, I'm going to return R itself. Okay, so let me just check this and see if it works. Here I've used ABC123 again. Right, so list voices dot, it should give me the error message, right? So you can see 401 unauthorized. What if I had the wrong, maybe I put lists, okay, which is the wrong endpoint? Then it will say something else, 404 not found, right? So if you know the error message, you can pretty much guess, what went wrong with your API. So if you have the wrong endpoint, you'll say give you a 404 and not found. And if you are not authorized, it will give you a 401. Okay, the other 40 type errors. All right, so let's go back and insert our correct secret key, and then we can actually print out the response. So this is a JSON file, so it's got a specific format. And you can see here, each section here is one voice. And there's a name for the thing, there's a display name. For us, honestly, the only few things that are important: the short name is important, the gender is important, and the locale is important. Okay, most of the other stuff is not that important. You can, if you want to fine-tune stuff, which you can, which I won't do today, then you need to know the other details. For us right now, just to get the default settings and to just have a voice, you need only know the short name, gender, and the locale. The locale tells you what language this voice can read. So, for example, let's say if I have a voice in Chinese, for example, then I need to ensure that the locale is Chinese. But if it's in English, then I need to have the correct locale. Otherwise, the voice will say things in the wrong way. So let's choose a locale, which is an English one. That should be EN. Just B, D. Okay, there's ENAU here. There are quite a few ones. So it's ENAU means English Australian. We can try something like this, female AU. Okay, so let's just copy these things down. Well, you don't know you don't know that you need to know these things, but I know because I actually read forward to understand what the full API requires. Okay, so if you go back to your documentation from Microsoft, right? If you go up on the quick start, it tells you here, this is for the list of voices, okay, sample response, etc. And the conversion part, okay, it tells you here, if I'm not wrong, let me see, where is it? Yes. So this is the sample request that we have from for the second part of what we're going to do, which is from to actually convert text to voice, not just listing out the voices that are available. So here you can see you need a few things. You need the locale, like ENUS. You need the name of the voice you're using, all right? And you also need the gender as well. In this case, it's male. Okay, so we'll come back to this in the next part. Okay, so you know now how to actually use the API to list the voices. We know the endpoint. We know to use HTTP GET. We also know that we need a header, which is the secret key. And then that gives us back a JSON file, which we need to, I guess, a response. We need to check the response and see whether it has, we need to check the response hash to find out whether it has a response at all. And if the error message, is there any kind of error message? Okay. Now we'll go on to do the next part of the API, which is text to speech. Okay, so this is much longer. So what I want to do is I will prime you first, right, on what I've already read. So then we can just go back to the documentation and see, you know, where is it exactly, right? So we know this API supports converting text to speech, maybe to MP3 and so on. It does support MP3. We need to know the route is this. It's a different route compared to the list voices. And you need to have a data section in your HTTP post. You have to use HTTP post. And the data section needs to be a special, how do I say, format. It's a text file format called SSML, Speech Synthesis Markup Language. Okay, it's a mouthful, but it's actually quite simple to use. And you need to set another thing called the content type to application/SSML plus XML. Okay, so I'll show you how to do that shortly. And you also need to specify what kind of output format you want Azure to reply with, because there are many different kinds of output formats, depending on the bit rate, on the, you know, how many hertz you want it at, etc. Right? So the resolution of the voice itself. There are many different kinds of options that you can use. So before I go on, let me just show you where I found out all the information in the documentation. Okay. This one. Okay. So the first part is that this here, let's say sample request, this is for the text to voice. And we know here that the request headers, there are at least 3. That's the, you don't need to use the authorization because we're using our secret key. So that's we'll use that. The content type must be changed to application/SSML plus XML. So we're going to copy that. Okay. And go back and maybe create a new thing. I'll just copy this too. Maybe because I'm going to reuse some of this stuff. Don't have to reinvent the wheel. Okay, so here I also need an extra header called content type. Okay, it needs to be set specifically to just cut and paste, honestly. Copy and paste. All right, so I've set that as the content type. You go back and see anything else that's required. Yeah, the output format here, right? So I'm going to copy this. The output format. And when you're starting off doing the API, it's best that you just set the defaults. Okay, you go with the default. So here, the sample request, just use the default that you have out here. You can use this. This is a PCM file. So you need to know what a PCM file is. A PCM file is like a wave, it's unencrypted. So it's actually quite long. All right. So maybe I don't go with the default here. There is actually a sample here. Where was that sample? Give me a second. Yeah. The curl sample. Hang on, not this one. The one? Not this one. Sorry, this is a token issue, access token. Okay, the one actually in the document that I saw, you have to dig around a bit. Okay, is this one here. It's high resolution voice in MP3 format. We use MP3 format because it's compressed, and that means that it will load faster in your browser, and it's faster for Smojo to process as well. Right, so I'll use the MP3 format. Right, this is high resolution. If you want something that's lower resolution, that's also possible as well. You can just choose a lower resolution MP3. Okay, so I've got that part done. Is there anything else that I need? Any other headers? Yeah, I need the user agent. Right, and you can set it to anything that you like to your application. It could be your bot name. I would just suggest you just put as Smojo. All right, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and that corresponds to these 1, 2, 3, 4 parameters in my headers. Right, not parameters, my request headers, sorry. Okay, there are no parameters here. So once I've got that, let me just save this. Speech, I'll have a speech tool. Okay. And always test this out to see if it works. Okay, it works. So this is just the header part. Now I need to actually get my speech. So I call it Azure speech. And I'm going to start off with just a very simple fixed sentence to say, just to test it out first, before I go out and make it, just to tidy it up. Right, so let's look at the request body here. So this is the request body out here. We only have to worry about this section here, because everything else on the top, this is a post. All right, we need to know what, okay, yeah, we need to know what the endpoint is, right? So the endpoint, where is that? So we know the endpoint, it's going to be just East US, right? Not East US 2, East US here. And I'm just going to copy this part here. I think it's called a bit, no, it's not the right one. So these are neural voices. This is the one that you want, right? This is for custom neural voices, sorry. We want just these ones, the pre-built neural voices, right? For the custom ones, it means that you can actually build your own voices and then store them on Azure and then use them later on if you want to. So we're not doing that, just getting the pre-built stuff. So just East US, which means that it's this one out here. So I'm going to copy out this thing here. And as usual, I am going to put this in a quote because I want to make this part here the region. You can change the region later on if you wanted to. Okay. All right, and then I'll call get header. And then I'm going to call the utils. And this time it's HTTP post 2. Okay, so just like get 2, it's now post 2. And this should return a hash. Okay, so let's try this out. And let's run this program and see whether it works. So let's get Azure speech dot, let's save this and run this. And if we're lucky, we'll see some, check the response. Unfortunately, the response here is null. Okay, so we want to examine and see exactly why is it null? What error did we face? Well, the errors are under the key null. So let's check that. Okay, so it says something like no permission to access this outbound connection. So that's an error that you can, it's very frustrating to actually debug. I was actually debugging this for quite a long time, to be honest, right? Until I found out what was wrong, right? So what was wrong is that we need, of course, we missed out the body, right, of this post, right? So the body needs to be set before we can go in here. So I'll say set body or set data section, sorry, data. Okay. The data section basically is your SSML, right? We call it SSML. So this SSML part needs to go in the parameter section. So there are three parts to the request. There's the route, there are one or more parameters, and then there is also the headers, right? So this is a special parameter. It's called underscore body. It's double underscore body, double underscore, and this is the file that we're sending over to Azure. I'm going to use a code, and I'm just going to, just copy off the example that I have out here. So let's look at example again. Yeah. So this is SSML. Okay. I'm just going to copy it and see what I get. Okay. And then here I need to call the utils param. Right, so what this does is to set the param given this key, and then this is the value. I think that tidy up this up just a bit so that it's more comprehensible. More readable. Yeah. Okay, probably more readable. So you can see here you've got the locale that we need to use, the gender for the voice, and then the short name that we're going to use as well for this voice. And this is a text that we're going to speak. Okay, so we're going to run this first. Let's see, do we get an error? Now it says okay. All right, so sometimes the message that comes out doesn't make too much sense. One of the reasons is probably because you've got the wrong format of data or not put anything else. Okay, so this actually is sending us a data, some kind of data. Now, the important part is that the data it sends back is not textual, it's binary, which means that we need to ensure that we set the system to receive or to take binary data. All right, so we're going to do something like this. Star utils again. And this is before, we have to run this before we actually do the HTTP post. Okay, so in other words, we tell the system it's binary format data, and then the system goes out and does its request. So it's utils.http-binary. Right? So now it knows, okay, look, I need to do binary data. It's still okay. All right. But if you try and print this thing out, let's say if you just try and print out the whole hash, you'll find that's a lot of junk in there, or what looks like junk. And that's probably because, oops. So let's look at the response. You can see the response, right? this junk out here for the response, it's actually an array, a binary array. Okay. So far so good. We managed to actually, go into the system, get a voice, get the file as a binary file. It will be in MP3 type format. But now the question is, how do we actually display this? How do we actually, play this file to the user? It's a binary format, right? What do we do? Okay, so this is a separate part. It's quite different from actually accessing the API. It's a separate question. I'll leave this for a bit. What I want to do right now is just clean this thing up here a bit more. Okay, make it more usable for us, right? So if you go back to list voices, we know that we've got one variable here called region here. What I want is to be able to do other things too. Yeah, like for example, the output format. Okay, so I'm going to change this. Take this and make it into a variable as well that we can set. Right, so variable output format. Okay, and then I'm going to use this variable inside here. Why am I doing this? It's because I don't want it to be hard coded. I want it to be something that we can actually, change. So maybe I have a region function, region exclamation mark. I can set the region, right? So just right, and of course the output format. Okay. I also need the other parts of the voice that I need to select. The first of all would be the language, right? So I'll set this as a default. So it's good to set defaults and then let your users, change them. Right, and then I want to give them the ability to set the language here. And the output format, what else do I need? I need the gender. In this case, it's male. And lastly, I need the name of the voice itself. So it's called a voice. Call it voice. Right. So what I'm doing here is just being neat. I'm putting all of these things as variables so that, and putting some defaults here, and so that you can actually, set it to something else later on if you want to, rather than having to fuss around with the source code. Okay, and why I'm doing this will become more apparent when later on when I show you how to take this and actually bundle it together as a cloud word, which you can then share and use much more simply without the source code. All right, so voice. All right, so I've got all my parameters I need here. Right, the output format, the region, the language, gender, and the voice. Right, this is R for, I think this is NEURAL, not wrong. Okay. Okay, so yeah, NEURAL. Okay, now here, what I want to do is that in this codes, I want to replace the things like, the language, etc., and so on with the actual language. So I call it lang for language. Again here, lang. And I'm going to use the language. Okay, so it will read the language variable. This @ symbol just the reading, and then it'll bind it to the word lang, and then you can just plonk it in there. And same thing for the gender as well. So just give me a second. Okay. Gender, and last of all, got the voice, right? Okay. And of course, we also want to, what's it called again? Put in the text as well, right? So, excuse me, maybe I'm going to redo this part, this whole function here, so that you can put in the text and it will give you the properly formatted SSML. Okay, I'm going to, instead of calling set SSML, I'm going to call it maybe to SSML, right? That's probably better. And so I don't have to know, I don't have to set the body here. I can do something like this to, right? Here the Azure speech when I have some text. Okay. And I'm going to convert it to SSML before I transform it into a set the params, right? So here I've set the params already. I've call it a binary format. I've said that the response needs to be in binary format. I've got the region here, and then here, this is the endpoint, got the header, and it should work. Okay, so let's give this a shot. See if it works. Okay, there's an error here. And that means that I've made some kind of mistake somewhere here, right? That's because I'm not given this the text that I want to produce. So hello, I am a small job. Right. Now, frequently you come across these kinds of problems like class cast and so on. It means you've done something, you know, wrong out here. The best thing to do, honestly, is just to comment stuff out slowly. Most likely we did some kind of, you know, we messed it up somewhere here. Let me just see this. To SSML, that looks okay. We've got the lang, gender, hash voice. Yeah. So maybe we took the text, but we didn't put it into here. So that could be a problem. Right. So this is quite a text. Okay, and we're going to replace this I'm excited to try speech and so on with text. All right, save that, and we'll run. It still gives us an error. That's text. That's T. Okay, so in this kind of situation, what you do is to find out where exactly the problem happened, right? So this system is failing at some point, and then it will not progress to code beyond that point of failure. So I'm going to put in something called a BP here. I suspect that's happening somewhere here. Okay, that means that this BP should never fire. If it does, it means the error is further downstream. Well, it is further downstream because the error is further down, right? So here, it's not here. It's not here. Could it be here? Okay, let's try swapping these two lines and see if we have any joy. All of you will probably face the same problem at some point in time as well. So knowing how to fix it is pretty important. We know it's not there. We know it's further down. Okay, so we're closing in on it. The error happens after all this stuff. So it could be that it's just before here. Yeah, so the error happens here because the BP does not fire up. So it's get header. So let's look at get header and see exactly where did it go wrong. So we can see here the secret key is set, output format is set. This part here, what's all this stuff here? This is not right. This ought to be here, right? So you've got the secret key, the content type, the output format, and the user agent. If I run this now, it should be fine. Not quite yet. The error is still in get header because if I put a BP before and after, you find that it doesn't works for the first guy, but not for the second one. Which means that this BP is not working, which means that something is wrong in get header itself. So let's try it again. This is okay. This is okay. Okay, so let's step through this one by one because I can't see it here. It's quite bright out here. Okay, so this is fine. The first one is fine. Second one, it's also okay. Third, it's still okay because it's still showing. Yeah, so the problem is out here somewhere, right? So, if I copy it correctly, let's zoom in here and see exactly where did it go wrong. Yeah, so it's somewhere here, I think, because before this, it should work. Yeah. So the problem is this thing, output format. So copy this. Okay, I see what the problem is here. Here you see I've got a variable called output format, right? What I've done is to overwrite it accidentally without calling it, giving an exclamation mark there. So this sets up a function to set the variable. What I've done is simply just overwrite the variable name. So that's why I was giving an error out there. Okay, so it's a name clash basically, inadvertently. It's a typo on my side. Okay, now it works, and you can see that the response is a piece of binary data, right? So the next part is how do we actually display this binary data, right? So that's a different question that we have to answer. Right, just to recap what we have done so far, is that we need to put in the data section, okay, using the underscore body underscore, double underscores. And we use the param word, which is called a key value. So the key would be the double underscore body and double underscore. The value is the SSML format text, okay? And we call param, again, star utils param. And if we have a null response, which did not, something went wrong, we did the check just now, okay? But we got and this is how we do the checks for null, all right? We check and see if the response is null, we want to check and see what went wrong. So that's why we want to check the headers that come back. And last of all, if it's 200 HTTP slash 1.1 200, then we're fine, okay? And so we need to always check the HTTP response. Now, I've already shown you how to do the, excuse me. I've already shown you how to do the SSML, okay? I just copied this from the sample that was given, and it's all you need really for this simple thing, because you're not using any custom voices, just using the predefined voices from Microsoft. And you need at least 3 different pieces of information: the language, which is in this case ENUS, the gender of the voice, which is male, and of course the name of the voice itself. So when you do the list voices, you'll get all of the different voices, and they will contain these 3 pieces of information, which you need to set for yourself. Okay. Of course, you got the text as well that you want to say. Okay, so be sure when you do the copy and pasting that you don't get the smart quotes. So sometimes, like in Windows or in Mac, when you do a copy and paste, certain single quotes or double quotes become converted. So you need to actually remove those things and actually put a normal single quote or normal double quote, which will appear as a straight quote, without any kind of curve in or out. So we need to know the lang, the gender, and the name. And not all the combinations are possible, so you need to check and see which is possible and which is not. Okay. And we've already got a sample working for ourselves. Okay. So this part I've already done. I'll show you how to do this already. Now the second part is, how do we get data in and out of the API itself? Okay, this is actually the hardest part. And it does require a lot of Googling. Okay. So most APIs are just text in, text out, and that's fairly straightforward, right? Text in, display the text, just return it back to the user. But in the case of a binary format, what do you do? Right? You can't just display a binary format and expect it to work. It doesn't work that way. It's not that simple. Okay. For the Azure text to speech, it's text in, obviously, but it's audio out, and the audio is in some kind of binary format. So we need a way to display this audio back to the user. That's the difficult part. Okay. So we need to do some Google searching. And we know roughly, or you should know that to display audio, you need the audio tag and a source tag. And actually what happens is this, that the source tag needs something called a URL. But the URL can be an actual URL, or it can be a data URL. So the data URL is what we want. It actually we need to take a binary format data, like how we already have right now, from the API, and we need to run something called a base 64 encoding over it. Okay. And we already have the binary data. Okay. We want to use this to base 64, which converts that binary data into an encoded string. And then we need to plonk it right into the player. Before we do so, I first want to actually run a test. Okay, so it's good to separate out your code that you're working on right now, like the APIs, with a test on the display side, because the display side code can be difficult, okay, and tricky, especially if it's written in HTML or JavaScript. You won't get any error messages out of that too easily, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to display. I'm going to use so we can close up the text to speech because we know we have something already, but we want to know, how do I display an audio, right? So I'm going to do a Google search. I'm going to say something like, or you can use GPT if you want to be honest. ChatGPT, right? How do I play audio in, let's say, HTML? Okay. So we know that we know that we need to embed the audio element. Okay, and it has a source element as well. All right, and you can see some samples out here. Okay, I'm going to copy this first. Now this won't work because these sources, I don't have them on my computer. I'm just copy this anyway as a starting point. So test audio. I'm going to use a quote, so it's include quote. And I'm going to delete one of these guys, and I'm going to do, well, I'll just try and play this and see what happens, okay? It shouldn't work because I don't have this audio file on my system on the cloud. So I'm going to say test audio. And just do a dot to just print it out. Okay, so this is already HTML. This whole IDE is in HTML. Your chatbots are also HTML. So that's why it's very easy to add this kind of stuff onto your system. You can see here, if I run this, you get a control here. I play it, nothing happens because, of course, you can't find the file. If I want to remove the controls, I can just click on that. Okay, and if I want to play automatically, the way to do that is to do something called autoplay. Again, I've done the Google searching, or you can actually even use ChatGPT for this part. Okay, but this should automatically play it if the file exists. Okay, in this case, it does not exist, obviously. All right. So here, I need to change the file format here because I'm playing MP3 and PEG. All right, or MP3 if you want to. And also here, the source, here it's a URL. What I want is to be able to embed data into it. All right, so again, I can do a Google search, say, how do I embed audio data HTML, nothing like that, right? And see what it comes up with. Okay. So it's showing me the source again. Raw HTML. Yeah, so this is what I'm looking for here. Okay, on the right hand side here. Okay, you see the source equals to data :audio /mp3 semicolon base 64 comma. So this is the part I'm looking for. Okay, what this is that frequently for HTML5, it supports not just URL but you being able to embed data directly into the system itself, right? Like that. Okay, but you need some base 64 data to add into here. So let me just maybe look on the net again and see if you can find some samples. So maybe I look at this part here for Stack Overflow. Okay, and you can see here there's actually a sample. Oops, it's not a full sample, unfortunately. Okay, so let's go to the sample that they prepared. So this is a long file here. Just copy and paste it. Wow, it's long. All the way through. Okay. Copy, dot here, just paste. And what I'm going to do here is just save this as a test. Okay, and just play this. Heard that? We try it again. Okay, so it's actually playing that sound directly in the browser itself. If I put the controls on, just say control like that. Play this now. Oops, I didn't save it, sorry. Controls. Control. Yeah. All right, cool. So we have this thing here, it's in base64, but now we have a binary format thing. How do we convert it into base64? That's a question. We need this, obviously. I'm going to copy this into our speech system. Right, so we have Azure speech, which is going to give us the hash. Okay, I'm going to just extract for us the response from this. All right, so I'm going to redefine this thing here. Okay, like that. Again, the input is text, but it's going to give us some binary. Or now, right? So I'm just going to run the Azure speech here. I'm going to test out and see what is the output. Okay, so here, got some H, a hash H. I'm going to check and see I'm going to check the what's it called again, the response code that comes out of that, right? So H that will give me the response code, and I want to check if the 200 OK is inside of it. If it's not, if you can't find that string 200 anywhere inside of the response code that comes out of this, I'm going to just return a null, right? And exit. Next, I'm going to check and see if there is a response. Okay. And then I'll say, look, if the response is null, again, I'm going to just exit now. And last of all, if it's okay, then I'm just going to return that response. And this would be a binary format data. But I want to convert this binary format into a string like this. And it has to be a base64 encoded string. Okay. So just for FYI, base64 encoding is basically trying to take these binary data and then convert it into a string format, which can be embedded inside HTML without much problem. So the way we do that is as a function in its module, again in utils, and it's called toBase64. So you will use this quite often, and there's a pair function. It's toBase if you want to just convert it from a binary format into base64 string. As the reverse, which is something like this, is base64 out, which means I've got a string which is base64, convert it back into a binary format, right? I'm going to do this one here instead. And this gives me not a binary, but a base64, which I can then use in my player. All right, so here, I'm going to call it a player. Right, and the input is the base64 that I want to put in. And of course, I need to put out some HTML, which is my player itself, right? And then here, I'm going to use a CTX variable, and I'm going to say audio, the audio file that I have. And here, from here to the end here, I'm going to just remove all of this junk. Oh, it's just too long. Right, and here is where the audio goes in. Right? So now I've got an autoplay system with controls, and it should actually play. But it needs a base64 input. So I've got the Azure speech stuff. So then I'm going to put it to the player. And then I'm going to put a dot to actually print it out onto the screen. Now if I play, oh, nothing happens. That's because I put a little, see, I've got this little extra little ding out here, the equal sign out there. Okay, so you need to be very careful about stuff like that. tiny typos, especially in HTML for audio, because it's a binary format. It won't like it. It's not so robust. Right? Let's try this again.
Hello, I am Smojo.
You heard that? Let me just put this up a bit higher.
Hello, I am Smojo.
All right, so we've gone out, gotten the API, got the binary format out, right? And we have just converted to base64, display it to your user. Okay, now you can actually package all of this stuff in a convenient format so that you don't have to include all of this source code to actually get it to work. All right, so the first step to doing that is to put it into a module. Excuse me, my battery seems to be going off. Give me a minute. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just to package all of this stuff into one nice little bundle, which can be shared to pretty much anyone. Okay, so put in a module here called modules star speech and end module right at the end here. So this is my testing code here, right? All right, to test the code, I need to say with module, with star speech, right? Let's just save this and give it a shot, see if it works.
Hello, I am Smojo.
All right. And this is not very useful because, I still need the source code to actually get it to work. What I want is to be able to export this. All right, so I'm going to export it as Azure/speech. Right, and instead of a semicolon, I use a semicolon full stop. All right, a semicolon followed by a period, and then we actually publish this as a what's it called again? Cloud word. Let's say exports star speech. Right, so star speech refers to the module name, which I made just now. So I package all of the words here into this module. And now if you use Azure/speech, Arnold/ because it's my username, right? Let me just show you what I mean. Let me just save. First, let me just run this first.
Hello, I am Smojo.
Okay, let me just remove the test code. Right, if I do this now, it shouldn't say anything. Okay, now here in a new file, and you can try this too at home. All right, just type in Arnold speech, like Azure speech, right? And just put in, whatever text you want to say. Something like that, okay?
Hello, I am Smojo. How are you?
Okay, so it plays. Now, last of all, let's clean this up a bit because what this module does when you export it, it'll export all of the words inside here, but not all of the words you should export, okay? Because if you then call up, Arnold/Azure/speech, all of the words will instantly be dumped into your dictionary, which means that region, output format, etc., which you don't really need, will be exported as well. So to prevent all of the unnecessary stuff from being exported, we use forget. Forget, for example, region, because we don't need that. We don't need to use it directly in the exported code. And in forget a lot of different things, right? So I'll use region, the output format. We don't need that. We don't need the language. We don't need the gender. We don't need the voice. We don't need, we do need the region, output format, and this kind of stuff because we need to use those things, right? We don't need get header. We don't need to SSML. We don't need Azure Speech because we're going to change that shortly. And we don't need player. What we're going to do is we're going to get a new one, with a new function here called speech, right? Which takes some text and produces a HTML, which can display. Now, this would work also in your chatbots, obviously, because chatbots are based on HTML. And for this one, is all we need is just Azure with the speech. Okay, and we are done. So we want this speech function to be produced in the exported file. Okay, but there's one catch here, and I forgot about this, and that is our secret key. So right now, the secret key is a function. What we need to do is convert it into a variable that you can set. So we call it as key, for example, or secret key, and we'll say something like, okay, and here maybe something like secret, right? All right. So now, if I publish this, I don't need ST either. Hang on. ST. Okay. Now here, if I run this, it will give me an error. Okay. Oops. If I try this, it will give me an error because I've not set the secret key. Undefined quotation audio. Yeah, because this gives me a null value. Okay, this Azure speech thing gives me null value. So maybe instead of doing that, what I can do is out here, I can give back empty response or something else, right? Instead of just giving null. That's one way of doing it. The solution for this, obviously, is to include secret, which is your own secret key. And then you have to say secret key. Okay, we set the secret key. And then when we do that, oh, can't find, oh, because I didn't save this. So test speech. Let's run this.
Hello, I am Smojo.
Yes, it works.
How are you?
All right, so you can try this out yourself. Now, these sentences can't be too long because they are, then the MP3 file that's sent over will be very large. And that will actually overwhelm your Smojo system. That's one drawback. The other drawback is that if you have these audio files put into a conversation where you are actually remembering the previous conversations, and that's an issue as well, because the previous conversations will also be played each time the page is redisplayed. Okay, so that's a separate issue that we can solve using IDs. Okay, so after the voice is played, you might want to include some JavaScript here to automatically fire to remove this. So the idea is that maybe you can just put an ID in here and have a JavaScript there. So as soon as the audio plays, it can trigger something which removes this audio player completely from the system. So here I've got the controls on, but really you want the controls off, right? So I'll do that. If I run something like this, then it
Hello, I am Smojo.
Display. Okay?
How are you?
So how can you use something like this in your chatbots? Very easy, because now all of this stuff is just text. There's no binary anymore. We've converted the binary into using base64. We've converted the binary into text, and now it's all just text. So it just functions. This speech thing will just work just like any kind of piece of text. Okay, you can put it into your MMs, you can do it into your A's. It's really up to you. You shouldn't put the dot because this is only for the IDE to display. Okay, if I don't have the dot here, it would not play on the IDE. But in your chatbots, you never want to put a dot in there because you want it to return, you want the speech to be returned back to your MMs or to your As. Okay, so that really ends my demo for today. If you have any questions, then please, I'd like to hear from you from Telegram, and I wish you all the best. Bye, guys.